It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that without Nintendo, the games industry as we know it simply would not exist. The Big N has been responsible for pioneering and popularizing a multitude of things that we take for granted in video games, across both hardware and software. And though they have, like any other company, been through some rough times, looking back on their track record, there's way more stuff to be impressed by than there is to be lukewarm on. Given their massive pedigree and their enduring quality, ranking every single major gaming platform that they've ever produced seems like an insane task. But we're nothing if not a little bit insane, so that's what we'll be doing here. Join us, or prepare to skewer us on your pitchforks, as we rank every single Nintendo handheld and home console from the worst to the best. 13. The Virtual Boy. While ranking pretty much every other system Nintendo has made was far from easy, there was never any doubt in our minds that the Virtual Boy belongs at the very bottom of this list. There is some reserved praise to be given here for its outside-the-box ideas and its usage of stereoscopic 3D back when games hardly even did polygonal 3D. But beyond that, the Virtual Boy has few redeeming qualities. Over the course of its life, and it was a very short life, the system got less than 24 games in total, a shockingly low number, and not one of them was worth writing home about. The asinine design of the hardware only drives home the fact that the Virtual Boy is best left to the recesses of our memories. 12. Game Boy Color. More than a hardware revision, but not quite a full-fledged successor, the Game Boy Color was caught between two worlds, which means even if we had wanted to, we simply couldn't have placed it very high on this list. But even considering the fact that it was more Game Boy 1.5 than a complete successor, and the fact that it didn't have a ton of games that could not also be played on the original Game Boy, the Game Boy Color's value and quality still can't be denied. It was the first ever handheld console to display color visuals, which for its time was an impressive accomplishment. On top of that, even though it didn't have a lot of out-and-out exclusives, there were still a few that stood out, including the likes of The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, and a surprisingly impressive port of Metal Gear Solid. 11. The Wii U. The Wii U is in many ways one of Nintendo's most disastrous failures of all time. In fact, if not for the Virtual Boy, it would be their biggest ever commercial flop in the hardware space. The console's failings in terms of sales, lacking third-party support, form factor, and branding and marketing have been talked about aplenty over the years. In spite of all the issues, of which there were several, the Wii U still holds a special place in our hearts because of its library, which, all said and done, is a very strong one. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Mario Kart 8, Super Smash Bros., Super Mario 3D World, Xenoblade Chronicles X, Super Mario Maker, Pikmin 3, Splatoon. Nintendo's first parties were firing on almost all cylinders during the Wii U years. 10. The Game Boy. Just as Nintendo established the model for home consoles that the industry follows to this day with the NES, which we'll get to in a bit, so too did they establish the model for handhelds with the Game Boy. Technology was extremely limited at the time, so to create a portable machine that was capable of delivering proper, fully-fledged games was an achievement in and of itself. But Nintendo backed that achievement with a steady stream of excellent games, many of which are considered to be some of the best games ever made, from Pokémon Red and Blue and Pokémon Gold and Silver to The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening and Super Mario Land. Number 9. The Game Boy Advance. The proper successor to the Game Boy, and what a successor it was. Each of the models that Nintendo put out for the GBA, from the original to the Game Boy Advance SP to the Game Boy Micro, was ingenious in its design, and collectively, the Game Boy Advance solidified Nintendo's status as the king of the console market. At a time when the Japanese giant was floundering in the console market with commercial struggles brought about by the GameCube's low sales, the Game Boy Advance's rapturous success kept them afloat. The only reason we don't have the GBA higher on this list is because, frankly, a huge chunk of its library is made up of ports and re-releases. To be fair, many of those re-releases saw their best versions ever on the GBA, while there was no shortage of excellent original releases for the handheld during its surprisingly short lifetime either. Number 8. The Wii. By the mid-2000s, Nintendo's stock in the console market was at an all-time low. Their sales and influence had been steadily falling with the N64 and then the GameCube, and for the masses, the PlayStation was king. With their fifth console then, Nintendo decided to tear up the rulebook and try something new. With the Wii, they stopped chasing the hardcore console crowd, stopped worrying about cutting-edge technology, and instead opted for mass appeal and accessibility, and in the process ended up releasing their most successful home console to date. And the Wii's success is well earned. Whether you're looking for casual fun with games like Mario Kart Wii, Wii Sports or Super Smash Bros. Brawl, or traditional experiences like the Super Mario Galaxy games, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, or Xenoblade Chronicles, the Wii's library had best-in-class games to offer for everyone. Issues like a deluge of shovelware, lack of third-party support, and outdated technology were knocks against the console for sure. But even with all of that, the Wii was an absolute win for Nintendo. Number 7. The Nintendo Entertainment System. Earlier we spoke about how the games industry as we know it essentially wouldn't exist if not for Nintendo. Well, Nintendo wouldn't exist if not for the NES. The legacy of this console can never be overstated. The NES was single-handedly responsible for reviving the gaming industry and then driving it to mainstream success. It is responsible for creating the model of home consoles that's followed to this day. Its library is full of industry icons that are remembered to this day as some of the most influential games ever made and have created entire genres. From The Legend of Zelda to Super Mario, some of the biggest franchises known to the games industry were born on the NES. And sure, a lot of those classics haven't aged too well, but purely on the basis of what it did for video games as a whole, the NES will always be remembered as one of the most important consoles of all time. 6. The Nintendo 3DS. At the beginning of its life, the 3DS was suffering from a lot of the same problems as the Wii U. Coming off the back of the wildly successful DS, the 3DS was struggling with branding issues, a pretty steep price, and a lack of compelling games in its first year or so on the market. Nintendo soon turned things around though, with a price drop and a barrage of one hit after another, and by the time the handheld approached the end of its life, it had accumulated a stellar library of games, which included incredible releases like The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, Super Mario 3D Land, Kid Icarus Uprising, Mario Kart 7, Animal Crossing New Leaf, and many, many more. The 3DS's stereoscopic 3D gimmick might not have paid off, and the handheld had some design issues that couldn't be ignored, but one look at its library is enough to convince even the biggest of the 3DS's early naysayers of its value. Number 5. The N64. The N64 was in many ways representative of everything that led to Nintendo's struggles in the console market, which saw them losing a massive share of the market to PlayStation. But there's just so much to love about this system. For its time, it was incredibly powerful and delivered stunning 3D visuals that its competitors could only hope to replicate. Meanwhile, though third-party megatons had adopted the PS1 as their platform of choice, Nintendo's first-party studios proved to be more than up to the task of filling that void. N64 exclusives like The Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask, Super Mario 64, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Kazooie, and Goldeneye 007 are to this day considered among the greatest games ever made. And that's just the creamiest of the cream of the crop. The N64 was not without its issues though, to say the very least. Its weirdly shaped controller in and of itself is enough to baffle even the biggest Nintendo fans. But on the back of its incredible library, it stands tall as one of Nintendo's best systems ever. 4. The Nintendo DS. Much like they did with the Wii, with the DS, Nintendo approached the market in a way that was quite different from how they had approached it in the past. with a focus on mass market appeal and accessibility. And much like the Wii, they chose to do that with what seemed like a gimmick on paper, but turned out to be a genius idea. The DS's 2 screens and its implementation of a touchscreen could easily have set Nintendo up for a massive failure, but their first-party studios and a number of third-party developers adopted the handheld's bizarre ideas in excellent fashion. The DS's library is a legendary one, succeeding in terms of both quality and quantity, and was chock full of incredible titles. The DS also launched at a time when Nintendo were facing actual stiff competition in the handheld market for basically the first time ever with the PSP, and in spite of that, it turned out to be the Big N's most successful piece of hardware to date. As it stands right now, the DS is the highest-selling handheld of all time, and the second highest-selling gaming system to date, behind only the PS2. Looking at its impressive and massive library and its knack for innovation, that success is very easy to understand. 3. The GameCube. Barring the Wii U, the GameCube is Nintendo's lowest-selling console to date, but even though it was a commercial disappointment for the company, for the fans and the players, it was a dream console. And there's very simple reason for that. The GameCube's catalogue of games is one of the best we've ever seen for any system. The number of games in its lineup that are regarded as all-time greats to this day is astounding. The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Metroid Prime 2, the Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil 4, Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, Beautiful Joe, Mario Kart Double Dash, Pikmin, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2, F-Zero GX, the list goes on and on and on. Oh, and did we mention that the GameCube has one of the best controllers ever made? Because it does. Number 2. The Nintendo Switch. After the colossal failure of the Wii U, Nintendo needed another brilliant idea to bring them back from the brink. And just as they did with the Wii, they once again decided to do something completely unprecedented. Realizing that splitting their resources between handhelds and consoles was no longer a smart move, they decided to converge those pipelines with the console-handheld hybrid that we know as the Switch. The moment it came out, it became abundantly clear that this one was one of the best pieces of hardware Nintendo had ever produced. On top of its ingenious form factor, however, something else that the Switch has going for it is a spectacular collection of games. It's only been out for about 4 years at this point, but with the likes of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and countless others, it's already amassed a collection of generation-defining titles, many of which can easily be called some of the greatest games ever made. Most of the Wii U's impressive library, which sadly never got the chance to reach the masses, has also been brought over to the Switch, while the system has also become a haven for indies, with gems like Hollow Knight, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Celeste and Stardew Valley, to name just a few, adorning its library. There's also the fact that the Switch has also enjoyed better third-party supports than any other Nintendo system in a long time. What's even more exciting is that we're only at the halfway point in the Switch's lifecycle. By the time it comes to an end, it may very well have become Nintendo's best system ever. Number 1. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System. There is no possible combination of words in the English language that can possibly do justice to how much of a resounding success the SNES was. And we can go on and on about its influence on the industry, or its excellent form factor, or its timeless controller. But the biggest point in the console's favor is, of course, its library, which is possibly one of the best gaming libraries for any system to date. Some of the best games ever made, games that have defined entire genres and informed the trajectories of massive developers and publishers, came out on the SNES. First-party Nintendo classics like Super Mario World and The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, beloved icons like Star Fox and Super Mario RPG, timeless classics like Super Metroid and Super Mario Kart. The volume of world beaters in the SNES's library is simply staggering. No amount of praise and adulation will ever be enough for the SNES. This is the essence of console gaming, representing Nintendo at their very best, and hell, the entire games industry at its very best. A true classic that will forever be remembered as an all-time great. And that wraps it up. If you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to our channel. We upload new videos daily, so make sure you don't miss them by subscribing. We appreciate your support, and we thank you for checking us out.